All right. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to our second TCP one-on-one. We're going to be talking about the Resident Evil film series and the reboot that was recently announced. So here we have myself, Renegade Operative, and next we have Mr. Bio Devil Dom.
Hey, how's it going? We're about to talk about some cancer, and I don't even know if this information on the reboot is good news per se, because it's Hollywood, and Hollywood tends to fuck up on a lot of video game related things.
Well, actually, I am kind of optimistic, and I'm gonna tell you why.
Mm.
One of the main things, I guess I can get right into it. One of the main things about this new reboot is that it's being produced by James Wan, and James Wan worked on the Saw series. So if you watch Saw 1 through 3, he's a great, producer. He does a lot of horror mystery stuff that is really awesome in the first Saw. So I kind of enjoy it. I will say he's a better pick than most. I also think they have a writer named Greg Russo, and he worked on the first Mortal Kombat film, and that is pretty much put on a pedestal as the best live action video game movie of all time. So I think they have two really good candidates, but it really depends on what direction they take for this new film series because they really, really fucked up the old one so bad to the point
Y-
where everyone always says final chapter is just terrible.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So, well, knowing that information, because I didn't really know too much about this reboot. I heard that it was getting rebooted. I did not know about who was going to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Hearing that, it kind of reminds me of how George Romero was originally supposed to make a live action Resident Evil movie, and his take was actually supposed to be closer to the games. While he did have some liberties taken with his own take, for the most part, it was supposed to be a lot more authentic by comparison to what Paul W.S. Anderson did. Um, Looking at the original series, live action series, it's just like, yeah, we went from going about a bunch of mercenaries, going into an underground lab hidden in some random chick's mansion who just so happens to work for Umbrella, to fucking the entire world is infected with zombies, and somehow, now we're seeing things like Las Plagas and all that, or like Magini and whatnot, and it's just like we went from that to seeing fucking Alice losing her I think it was in the same movie too, where she loses her powers yet can still go toe to toe with Wesker. It's like it's time to fucking stop. you
Yeah,
know
Wesker was like
uh,
the fucking president, and I never really got that angle. I'm like, what are they doing? This, like, I understand that Wesker is a very popular character, but it makes no sense how far they really taken it, and they killed off some key characters like Barry. He's dead now, and I believe there's another one I don't know. They killed off like Carlos, and I'm like, what are they doing?
oh
It
yeah,
makes no sense.
yeah, that is definitely true. I think, um see, because we also had information a few years back talking about a potential Netflix TV series called Arclay, and it was
Hmm.
supposed to be a lot more like the first Resident Evil, and I think it was supposed to kind of delve into the events prior to the actual Mansion incident. Just really delving into like the investigations prior to stars going out into the Arclay Mountains, and finding the training facility and finding the Spencer Mansion. But I don't think anything ever came out of that. Um, and then we have this where it's like they can take any angle they want. Um, I think the biggest concern that I would have with this is that there is the potential of, oh well, they could be taking this in a similar direction to what Paul W.S. Anderson did, where it has nothing to do with the games. And that could work if it's done right, and if it's not over the top and really stupid like what Paul W.S. Anderson did. If it was just a genuinely good, like, well thought out movie, that at least, even though it was taking liberties on making its own story that is not related to the games, could, potentially introduce some things as a movie itself that would still be interesting to watch, or interesting to watch.
I think my main fear is that they really should not have any studio interference, but they're going to. They're going to have that interference where it's like the director might want one thing and the studio might want something else. So we really had that series identity crisis for Resident Evil for a long time now, where it borderline went on action and horror back and forth. I think it does need to be more of a calculated horror story, because that's the mistake that Paul W.S. Anderson made when he made Alice do all this crazy and weird shit and made her a Mary Sue. So we don't want to see that. We already saw it done, and if they're going to reboot something, they might as well take it in a direction that is similar to the older games, where it's more of a horror-like feel, because I think they could do a lot with a R-rated horror movie that is very hardcore, and, it packs a big punch. So I don't want the studio to come in and fuck it up. That's my main fear, but the people they have behind this project are pretty much fit for the job, in my opinion. It just depends on how this is really tailored. If anything, I think they should take a lot of inspiration from, like I said, the older games, and maybe get some input on how things are governed by, like, the CGI movies, because they are incredible. They're top quality, and they really, fit in the Resident Evil lore because they are canon. So maybe bring those characters back instead of using like these new Mary Sue like characters that really don't mean anything or resonate to the audience. I don't mind seeing totally new characters in this reboot, but they need to bring back something that resonates with the fans, and I believe that is a lot of what they are missing with the original film series.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree. And I think, like definitely like a focus on like horror would be nice, because it's like, you're making a Resident Evil movie, and you'd think like, okay, let's try to make this semi-horror to some degree. Obviously, people are not going to be scared by zombies these days because, everyone's seen them before. Although you could put in a different spin on it because of a lot of the different BOWs that you encounter in the games. So there's some things you can do. And I will actually, the one thing I will credit the previous live action Resident Evil movies is that in some instances they did take some liberties with some standalone BOWs that were exclusive to those movies. Like I think the third one, I think it was Extinction, if I'm not mistaken. They had that like dude that like kept injecting himself with the T virus or whatever, and he ended up like, and he ended
was
up
like
getting
a
like
super
regenerator
tyrant,
or
something
right?
like that. Like I remember where I'm not sure if this is the scene, but I remember where Alice was fighting some guy, and it was in the same like laser room or something. I don't know if it's from that movie specifically, but maybe, you can correct me if wrong.
Yeah, I think it is, because they go into like an underground facility in Umbrella, and it just so happens to replicate the mansion and the laboratory from the first movie.
Yeah.
So, but like I said, and getting to the point, like taking liberties like that, it's not really so much of a bad thing. It's just a matter of, can you write it well? And as far as like the genre is concerned for a movie like this, I think really the key focus, and like you had mentioned, take some inspiration from like the games and the CG films, is to kind of take a mix of horror, like mystery, sort of like detective kind of feel to it, because a lot of the characters do end up going around investigating and picking up files and finding out different information on Umbrella and whatnot. So stuff like that would be kind of interesting if they could put that into the mix. And admittedly, I don't think it would be too bad to have just like very little action. And I only say that just to, if it's like a final sequence of the movie, it's like the very end and they're going up against like a giant tyrant or something like that, right? Like that would make sense to have like an action sequence for that, even though for the most part the movie would be horror.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my take on that. But I want to know from you, like, what do you think of like the possibility of them maybe taking this new movie and just looking at like maybe only the newer games, or maybe only looking at like say 7, for example, and not really getting a good example of what Resident Evil as a movie should be?
Okay, so I think for the most part, the over the top, ridiculous nature of Resident Evil that needs to be scrapped for the film series they're rebooting because for the most part that's kind of why the Anderson films sort of went left is because they went in this direction where it's like full nonstop action and shaky cam. I fucking hate shaky cam with a passion.
Yeah.
That stuff being included in this one should not exist. I do believe that, of course, this is a movie, so they need some set pieces here or there. But for the most part, I do think that they need to go in the direction where it's like maybe a little bit of a mystery. You don't know what's going on. Like in the original Resident Evil, you didn't know what was going on in the first game. There was this big conspiracy about Umbrella. So many people behind it, Wesker betraying everyone, and I think maybe they need that sort of plot where it's very like methodical and mysterious, and you don't know who's behind the scenes until like the very end, where you have these like giant BOWs just roaming amok, and I think that would be the best opportunity to use like puppeteering and stuff that was in the thing to make very grotesque monsters on the screen. So I think they have the possibility to show us something that we don't know what's going on. Everyone's freaked out, and I think that will be the best experience is to fear the unknown.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that just kind of goes back to the whole idea of like what I was saying earlier with, we know that there's going to be zombies of some sort. That's kind of a given. And that's not what people are really going to be scared about. But if they see something that's like not familiar to them, like if they saw like various different like BOWs and whatnot, like I don't think any of the live action Paul W.S. Anderson films had like hunters, for example.
Oh
Which
yeah,
is like
they could
so
bring those
like,
back.
could you imagine how like good that would be if they could like put that into fruition, and they can make like maybe like a horror sequence where they're just like being chased down by a hunter, especially with like the different hunter variations there are in the series. There's like so much potential for something like that.
I think for the most part they need to also make us feel for the characters because I mean Alice was overpowered, of course. Because of this, she was so OP that we really didn't feel anything for her because it feels like she can get out of danger at any second. So I think for the most part the characters need to feel a lot more human. I don't mind if they have big set pieces, but put them in situations where the characters feel like they could die. Like if I really felt like a character could die in a situation and it really matters for the next scene, then that is good plot. Like that's good plot emotion. They're really emoting these characters that are important to the audience and the story. So I think that would be a good idea to put that back in.
I definitely agree. I think also too, like if we're gonna talk about anything else that they could do to kind of gauge like interest of people, especially like longtime fans and whatnot, throw in like little nods to the games too. I think that would be really nice because like I think it would be pretty funny if we ended up actually seeing like the green herbs from the games in a movie, right? And actually see somebody like smoking one of those off just to heal their injuries. Like I just think it would be a great little nod.
Yeah, bring back Mike Epps and let him smoke a green herb.
Right, right. And aside from that, though, I mean, like, I kind of want to go back to earlier point that you made too, like, thing with the designs and like the puppeteering and whatnot. I know with like George Romero's take, it was supposed to be like a really like live action nothing, or how should I put this? It was like everything was kind of done like on set. It was like all like makeup and whatnot. They had like practical effects basically.
Yeah,
That's part of
practical
the
is
fucking-
very good. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I could understand for maybe something like maybe for like certain sequences where practical just wouldn't work. So doing like a blend between CG and practical, I think, is fine. Just hopefully it's not an overuse of CG, because that was something we ended up seeing a lot in the later Resident Evil live action movies, which was also kind of an issue. But yeah, I think for the most part, it's just a matter of what can they do that Paul has done to basically butcher the franchise and not do that.
Well, I think we went over a few like bad CG, no Mary Sue characters like Alice. They really need to home in the fact that we should care about the characters. Um, I'm trying to think of more. No shaky cam, please don't fucking do this. Because it makes your movie very convoluted and hard to see. And yeah, I think the references to the games should be present. It shouldn't just be like, oh, Leon shows up, he's not, interesting. Barry shows up, he dies. We want cool and interesting references when it comes to the video games that adds to the lore of the story. And I mean, I don't mind them doing some liberties, taking some creativities, and maybe changing up some characters to fit their new film timeline, air quotes. But they need to make it in an interesting way. And a lot of Hollywood films, they always go for this PG-13 dumbed down nonsense. So I hope that this new reboot does not fall in line with the same sort of venture. It needs to be, if you're gonna go like do this, you need to do it all the way. That's how I feel it should be done. Yeah, don't pull punches or do anything. I mean, R-rated movies have still been successful, like Logan and Deadpool. So I think they really need to really make sure that they tell the fans that we're gonna do this, no questions asked, and we're gonna make it as violent, and we're gonna put in a lot of horror, and we're gonna make our best effort to make this really good.
You know what I was just thinking?
But
So you know how in the original PlayStation 1 Resident Evil, they had a little bit more gore in comparison to the remake, but they altered that stuff because of Zero.
yeah,
Could you imagine if, like, they played out similar scenes where, like, somebody picks up one of the handguns and they're saying, like, oh shit, it's somebody's hand on there that we knew. Or, like, oh shit, we knew that guy and his head has been torn off by that zombie. Shit like that, I think, would be really great. And even as far as like practical effects, because I'm thinking more about that too. Like, if we're seeing Stars characters, like if this is going back to like 1998 and we're seeing characters from Stars, like I think they should go above and beyond and maybe give them the samurai edge too, just to give a little bit of more
authenticity.
Yes, yeah, I can't speak today, as you can tell. But yeah, like doing that, I think would just like nods, practical effects, and just all out gore. I think would just make a great movie.
I'm thinking about a question actually. If they do this reboot, what direction would you want them to take this story wise?
For myself personally, I would want it to be more akin to like classic games. Maybe leading up to, I would say leading up to like maybe starting from maybe Zero or remake all the way up to like Code Veronica. I don't think they should really go anywhere past that. I mean, they could, as far as like the aesthetic is concerned, but I don't know. The one thing I don't want to see is just like either they take something like Revelations 2, Resident Evil 6, or Resident Evil 7 and use like inspiration from those three games in particular and just completely just tear this movie apart because of that. 7 especially because that game in particular, right alongside Revelations 2, kind of, or not kind of, actually really conflict with lore.
Hmm. I'm trying to think myself. Yeah, I think for the most part, the story should be a self-contained plot. Definitely, they should go back and harken to the original. Like, you're stuck in a mansion, you're trying to get out, you basically need to survive. I think that is one thing they should do for the plot of the Resident Evil story if they do this reboot. The main thing is maybe they could do Resident Evil 2 as well, where the entire fucking city is infected. It's a citywide infection, and everyone's fighting to survive. I think that would be very interesting as a movie premise because I remember playing Resident Evil 3 and being so enticed at that intro. That intro was amazing. Also, Dom, I think you got cut off, but I was basically giving my point. I think that they should go maybe like Resident Evil 2, large scale outbreak.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I was hearing that. I was agreeing with that. I
mhm.
actually I don't know how much time we're on here left.
We got about a good 9 minutes left.
Oh, okay, yeah. I thought we had like no minutes left, but I'm glad you actually brought that up because what they could do actually is they could actually skip the whole like premise of 0 and 1 and
Mhm.
go straight to like 2 and 3, right? And they could still do like a lot of the conspiracy stuff and like the mystery surrounding like the police station and a lot of like Umbrella and whatnot. I think if anything, if they want to ramp up the gore, they could just go straight to like how 3 was like,
Oh yeah, three
and
was
just
pretty
kind of,
brutal.
like, and a sequel because technically 2 does take place in between the timeline of 3. They could just have the movie that is based off of 2 if they decide to do a sequel, and if this reboot is successful, base that sequel off of 2 and introducing characters like Leon or Claire.
I have another good question, actually.
Hmm.
Given how Resident Evil Vendetta is getting a lot of positive success in Japan because the movie is being praised in Japan, what do you think the CGI movies do better than the live action ones?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Um, well, for starters, it's definitely like the character portrayal. I mean, recently I only found out that Ruben Langdon was reprising the role as Chris for the mocap for that movie.
Mhm.
So that was definitely interesting. But for for those movies, if you go all the way back to that 4D Executor, I think it was like a part of like an arcade thing. But you
I think it
can,
was like 3D,
it was 4D.
4D. Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, it was called like 4D Executor, and that's like their first real attempt at a CG like thing, and that was interesting. But it was like, okay, none of this actually makes any sense. The gore is cool, but it's like, what does this have to do with Resident Evil? And luckily, it's not canon. But then we move on to Degeneration, Damnation, now Vendetta. And one thing that I've noticed is that, I didn't like the first movie that came out as far as the CG movies are concerned.
Yeah.
It was disappointing of the three, but I would say it's far more entertaining, and because it's canon to the actual games, it's far more enjoyable knowing that in comparison to the live action. And one thing I will give Capcom some credit here when it comes to filming and stuff like that for like CG stuff, where they have like in-house, they have a say via in-house, right?
Yeah, in-house
With
studios.
with what goes down, or they have somebody who supervises. And it just seems like every time they make a new one, a new CGI movie, they really take the criticism to heart and improve on those issues from the previous movie. And you know, the second CGI movie was a clear example of that. There was just a lot more going on. There was a lot more interesting dialogue between the characters, a lot more at stake. And I just found myself enjoying that movie a lot more. And I remember you had said to me right before we had watched it as part of the cinematic experience that I would enjoy it. And lo and behold, I do enjoy it. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't surprise me that a lot of people are really enjoying Vendetta, because it just kind of seems like, you know, they're doing, they listen to that fan feedback and they apply that to each sequel. And that's a good thing. And I don't think that the live action series ever did that. You know, and I know this is kind of sidetracking, but I'd also mentioned that sort of feedback I hope to see in like other things related to Capcom. Like, I would like to see another season of like Devil May Cry, the anime. And I think that Capcom would improve on something like that, given just how they've done with Resident Evil. So really just listening to the feedback is what I'd like to see for live action, because I think live action, that's the biggest problem with the live action movies, is that no feedback was ever really taken into consideration.
Yeah, listening to fans is very important, because I remember, I think people were saying the Resident Evil CGI movies are too short, but Vendetta is the longest one. It's almost 2 hours. So that's pretty impressive. Listening to fans is important, and I think another thing that the CGI movies do is the fact that they are, you know, canon. They have some character development from the games. You know, you have Leon going around. He's not butchered. His personality is pretty much on point in Damnation. So I think that if they are going to use these characters, maybe like, you know, pay some homage to how the games are. I think for the most part, Greg Russo, the writer for Mortal Kombat, after seeing that movie, he really homed in on the point that the characters are pretty much like virtually the same. There's like, I could look back at that movie and I could think, oh, that's Scorpion, that's Sub-Zero. They pretty much are similar to how they are in the games. So that's kind of what I want to see. I want to see those characters be similar to how they were in the CGI movies, because that would be, you know, pretty much a nostalgic trip for me, and I would like to see them put in new situations on screen.
Yeah, and I think, if I remember correctly, they did portray characters like Johnny Cage really well, as just, you know, having him be like an obnoxious
he's a cocky asshole, right? Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, it's like, I think, you know, if you can do it like that, you know, I think I can maybe have that same optimism as you when it comes to this movie. The more we discuss it, I feel like the more optimism I could potentially have. So I want to hold my breath for now and wait until we see like some sort of footage or, you know, screenshots or whatever, and then I will kind of make judgment from there.
Yeah, I need to see like concepts, how it's going to look. Like I said, James Wan, he pretty much did Saw 1, and I loved how just grungy and dirty and filthy that movie looked. It's a pretty gory and violent centerpiece. So I think if they sort of inject a little bit of that into Resident Evil, they might have something if they create something new with it, but it's just, you know, BOWs and the mystery behind what's going on being at the forefront. So once we see some footage, I might be a little bit more optimistic, but if I see like people like Alice flipping around, they just need to scrap that concept entirely of bringing back, you know, Mila, all that stuff. Please don't give Anderson any directorial, you know, debuts or qualms or things of that nature, because he's gonna kill it.
You know what? There was at one point, and I think I brought this up before on air. Tamim wanted Paul W.S. Anderson to make a Devil May Cry movie based off the reboot at one point.
That's just...
Yeah, you can imagine how bad that would already be. And it doesn't even matter if it's the reboot at this point. It's just, oh, well, it's fucking Paul W.S. Anderson. No, fucking keep that shit from as far away from him as possible. I mean, he could butcher the reboot, that's fine, but a lot of people who don't know anything about the games will be like, oh, Devil May Cry, that was shit, and kind of associate the games if they ever see them in a similar fashion. That's
Yeah, a
just
lot of
how
people do
casuals
that
are.
already. Yeah, they do that already with the classic series and the reboot series, trying to put them together when it's really, not the same thing.
Hmm.
So I think that for the most part, I need to see some concepts. Don't let Paul Anderson anywhere near it, and the main thing is take a lot of inspiration and liberties that are good liberties, not bad ones that make absolutely zero sense for characters or like placements in the plot. I think for the most part, this movie should just be a giant love letter to the fans.
Hmm.
If they did something like that where it's not a movie comparison, but how Doom 2016 or whenever it came out, how that game basically took the formula, they put something new to it, and then they basically just went in and did the best they could with it. I think that would be revolutionary for the film reboot, and that would give them the feedback they need if they ever make a series out of this new rebooted timeline.
Hmm. Um, I think because I think we are running short on time now, but
Hmm.
just one last question, at least from my end. Um, so if they were to bring in Jill for this movie, who would you want that actress to be?
Uh, I'm trying to think. It's so hard. I would want them to use Julia Volf honestly because
I was gonna say the same thing.
she looks the part. She is the original mocap actor for remake. So I would want them to use her. She seems very passionate about what she's doing. Now I understand that it's a movie, so you need somebody with that acting experience. But put her in some acting classes. Get her shaped up. I'm pretty sure that she would be thrilled to do something like that if they approached her. So I would say Julia Volv, no question.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think it would work for two reasons here. One, we have an we have a model that basically is literally Jill Valentine. I mean, you can even go on like her Twitter and like Instagram, and she'll always post like pictures of her cosplaying as the character.
Hmm.
So like that's already like you'll hear people talk about the live action movies and say like, well, why didn't they just get some of these people that cosplay because they actually look more like the characters than what Paul W.S. Anderson was getting, right? Um, but in this case, it's like, yeah, you really should, only because it is the literal personification of Jill Valentine. Um, and also, just like you said, if it's a matter of having to get her into acting classes or get her up to snuff to have her understand how acting for like a movie is in comparison to like a video game, I don't think there should be any problem with it. I think that would just kind of increase uh, the authentic feel for that movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, Paul Anderson made some weird changes, like Jill smoked and she was very sympathetic, and Alice stole the spotlight. So I wouldn't want to see stuff happen like that for the new rebooted timeline. I think everything should be fair. Like I said, a giant love letter to the fans. That's the best thing that they could really do for this.
Hmm. Yep.
So I think we are out of time officially, so I think it's about time to do those outros.
Yep. So you all can find me on YouTube, Twitter, and never on Twitch as biodevil_dom. Uh, I'm working on a Resident Evil video, ironically. It's close to being done. I've procrastinated on this for months, but it is finally coming soon.
Alright, and you can find me on YouTube at Renegade Operative. You can find me on Twitch at Renegade_Operative. You can find me on Twitter at RenOperative_. I will be reading something special, and that's going to be the Dead Space comic. I'm gonna finally go through that since I picked it up yesterday, and I'm probably gonna do a review. And I'm probably gonna review the Injustice comic a little bit further, and then get comics out of the way. So once that comes to the channel, I will let everyone know. This was a fun podcast, a nice one-on-one talking about the Resident Evil film reboot, what we thought about it, what we desire. I think once they show more news, we could probably talk about it more in depth, or maybe even do stuff like a breakdown of the things that are going to happen at E3 if they show off like Resident Evil 2 remake. I think that would be a great cooperative analysis if they show off like extended gameplay or extended like trailers.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think there's going to be a lot of stuff for like E3. Like I definitely am looking forward to whatever they're going to be showing off for stuff like Death Stranding and whatnot. It actually, and just because you kind of reminded me of this with comics, I have the Evil Within comic now, and I want to get into reading that soon. But that's a sequel for the Evil Within is also rumored to be at E3, which would be so damn awesome if they show off a trailer at E3, because I would definitely be down for doing a cooperative analysis for that game.
Same here, and also I think they should do a series on Evil Within, just like do a maybe an anime or short for Netflix. I think that would be the perfect platform. Same for Resident Evil as well. I would like to see like some anime content for Resident Evil in the future because it has so much potential.
Yeah, I need to read that comic because like I need to see if it's any good or not, because maybe they can definitely do some more stuff via comics.
Yeah. But this is the TCP signing off. Hopefully you guys have fun with this one-on-one, and we will see you guys next time. Later.
See ya. That was fun.